Some schools closed in the Washington, D.C. area as part of a Day Without a Woman walkouts that echo the recent day of strikes by immigrants. It's International Women's Day in the United States, rallies planned in major cities with a particular eye to Congress rolling back health care coverage, single women among the most vulnerable. And then, of course, there are plans to defund abortion.
That's why this administration will work with the Congress to end taxpayer funding of abortion and abortion providers.
I think the era we're in currently is absolutely unprecedented. We and our constituents are very concerned about potentially women losing the right to control their bodies and control their fertility.
For more, we go to San Francisco, and Dawn Porter, whose 2016 documentary Trapped shows the grim reality of women's reproductive rights in states where abortion is, well, all but illegal. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we ask you about the story, let me just bring you back to something that happened Tuesday. The New York Times reporting that Donald Trump offered to maintain federal funding for Planned Parenthood if the group stops providing abortions. The group refused. What's your reaction to that story?
I think that that's actually a gross political ploy, realizing that Planned Parenthood is widely supported across the United States as one of the largest healthcare providers, and that it's become politically kind of a political hot potato for the Republicans to actually go after Planned Parenthood this specifically. So it's a ham-handed approach that Planned Parenthood rejected out of hand. I think the Republicans' opposition to Planned Parenthood is not new. The opposition to abortion is not new, but there was some feeling that momentum was now on their side with the Trump administration, and that's the battle against abortion has now taken a new turn.
Trump claims that most Americans oppose public funding for abortion. When you were preparing your documentary, what was your feeling on that? Because surveys vary wildly on this.
Yeah, the overwhelming number of supported studies show that that is simply not true. I mean, the first thing to remember is there is no public funding of abortion due to the Hyde Amendment, federal funding, due to the Hyde Amendment, which has been in place for quite some time. No federal money can be used for abortion. So even if you're going to Planned Parenthood for an abortion, not one penny of federal dollars can be used. So when Republicans are talking about defunding Planned Parenthood, they're only talking about defunding other medical services. That is removing about the $450 million that Planned Parenthood gets for pap smears, mammograms, other healthcare screenings. So it's really, really important to not let the terms be obfuscated and to be unclear. That's why Vice President Pence's statement that you played at the top is so misleading. There isn't any taxpayer-funded abortion, and that's something I disagree with. But that's been the law of the land, and Planned Parenthood and other clinics have been abiding by that. So, on the suggestion of it always interested me that abortion is described as controversial. In fact, more than 2/3 of Americans support some form of the right to choose. They may not support abortion for themselves personally, but they don't believe that it should be banned or that the government should take away another woman's right to choose. So it's actually not a controversial proposition. What you have seen is a hyperbole by a very small but vocal Tea Party extremist, and that has been going on since 2010. And if I can explain quickly, President Obama is elected in 2008. In 2010, the Tea Party takes over, and one of the first things they start to do at the state level is target abortion clinics with state laws regulating the clinics. And those laws work their way through the courts until last year's seminal Supreme Court decision.
And let me ask you about that. Let me just ask you about that, because it's a question I've been asking myself for decades. Why is this such a hot button issue in the United States?
It actually hasn't been that much of a hot button issue. It's been made a hot button issue when you see a swing to the right at the state and local level. And it is part of this conservative values first. In a lot of ways, the abortion regulation situation really was the precursor to the election of Donald Trump. It's when Trump says make America great again, take America back, what's he talking about? A time when abortion was illegal, when women didn't work, when immigrants knew their place, and when there was segregation. I mean, it's all part of this conservative social shift. Abortion has the statistics, the surveys on abortion have been remarkably consistent. Follow in the 44 years since Roe. Americans support a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, let
And
me
the
just
hard
explain that. That's since 1973. You're talking about Roe v. Wade, which is the decision by the Supreme Court, which legalized abortion in the United States. The title of your documentary is called Trapped, and because it refers to something called trap laws. Explain what those are.
So, trap laws are laws that were passed by state governments, and they were passed slowly. There are uh, very conservative legal advocacy groups, kind of Tea Party funded advocacy groups like Americans United for Life. And they started drafting, so post Roe in the 1970s, there was some back and forth about how well abortion would be accepted. From the 1980s to the 90s, into the early 2000s, there was largely kind of a détente. If you want to get an abortion, you are entitled to get an abortion. But there wasn't this big anti push. And then in the late mid 2000s, with the rise of the Tea Party, you start getting these groups that are passing around laws that target clinics. And the issue with these laws is they sound very reasonable. So, for example, a clinic has to have an admitting provision with a nearby hospital until you find out that no hospitals will grant those transfer agreements. Or a doctor has to have admitting privileges at a hospital. Same deal. When the doctors went to apply for admitting privileges, all of the hospitals would turn them down. Clinics were required to widen their hallways by 3 inches to comply with very burdensome.
All these laws that obstruct, in other words, and you wind up, and you show it very well in the documentary, how you have states like Mississippi with one abortion clinic that's open. Dawn Porter, I want to thank you for joining us. The documentary is called Trapped. Thank you for being with us on this International Women's Day.
No, thank you for sharing. It's such an important story. I really appreciate it.